It's 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, and a man is dragging himself across a sun-baked street with nothing to protect him. No air conditioner, no fan, no ice cube, not even a concept of what those things could be. This is Thebes, Egypt, roughly 1350 BCE. And this man, his name is Nak, is about to spend one brutal summer discovering, purely through trial and error, exactly how ancient people beat the heat. By the end of this story, he'll have built something that could realistically cool a room by several degrees using nothing but mud, water, and reeds. And here's the twist. Some of what he figures out is still cooling buildings today, 3,000 years later. Let's start with the problem. Egyptian summers routinely reached temperatures we would now call dangerous, and ancient physicians actually knew it. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts in existence, written around 1550 BCE, describes symptoms that sound exactly like heat exhaustion and dehydration. Exhaustion, confusion, collapse. This wasn't guesswork for the people living through it. Heat could genuinely kill you, and everyone knew it. Next first lesson has nothing to do with technology. It's timing. Egyptians structured their entire day around the sun. The brutal midday hours, roughly from noon to 3, were reserved for rest and shade, while hard labor happened early morning and evening. This wasn't laziness, it was survival math, and versions of the exact same idea appear independently all over the ancient hot climate world, from the Mediterranean siesta to rest periods recorded in ancient Mesopotamian labor schedules. There's also the question of water itself, not just for drinking, but for staying alive at all. Egyptians understood, long before anyone had a word for dehydration, that heat without enough water was deadly, which is part of why settlements clustered so tightly along the Nile, and why water jars were kept in every shaded corner of a home. Staying hydrated wasn't a wellness tip back then. It was the baseline requirement that made every other trick in this story actually work. His second lesson is even simpler: what he wears. Egyptians favored loose, light-colored linen for a reason. Linen breathes and wicks sweat away from the skin, and pale colors reflect sunlight instead of absorbing it. The same reason desert cultures across the world, from the Bedouin to the Tuareg, independently settled on flowing white or light-colored robes. Tight, dark clothing traps heat against the body. Loose, pale linen lets air actually circulate around it. But timing and clothing alone don't cool a house down at night when thick mud brick walls, baked all day by the sun, keep radiating heat for hours. So Nakt's third lesson is architecture itself. Egyptian homes were built with walls sometimes 1.5 feet thick, deliberately, because mud brick has something called high thermal mass. It absorbs heat slowly during the day and releases it slowly at night, smoothing out the temperature swing indoors. Windows were small and placed high, letting hot air, which naturally rises, escape near the ceiling. Streets were narrow and winding on purpose, so buildings would shade each other for most of the day. Nak sleeps a little better that night. But by the next afternoon, his workshop is an oven again. Architecture buys time. It doesn't actually cool the air. So here's where it gets genuinely clever. And this next trick runs on the exact same physics your modern swamp cooler still uses today. Wealthier households hung wet reed mats and woven grass screens across their doorways and windows. As air passed through the wet material, some of the water evaporated, and evaporation pulls heat directly out of the air. The breeze coming out the other side was noticeably cooler than the breeze going in. Egyptian tomb paintings actually show us servants fanning jars of water, specifically to cool them, and some households used porous clay jars for the same purpose. Water seeps slowly through the clay, evaporates on the outer surface, and chills the water inside. For the first time, Nacht feels an actual cool breeze in the middle of a heat wave, but Egypt wasn't remotely alone in figuring this out. Around the same centuries and after, ancient Persian engineers were building badgirs, tall, windcatcher towers that caught wind at rooftop level and funneled it down into the building below, sometimes straight over a pool of water for extra evaporative cooling. Persian cities also built yakchals, massive dome-shaped structures that stored ice harvested in winter, insulated so well it could last through an entire desert summer without any refrigeration at all. Some of these structures still stand today, over 60 feet tall. Further east, the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley was built with carefully oriented streets and covered drainage designed partly to channel airflow through the city. And meanwhile, wealthy Romans piped water directly through the walls and floors of certain rooms, a cooling counterpart to their famous heating system, the hypocaust, and dug dining rooms partly into hillsides so the earth itself would keep them cool. Different regions, completely different materials, but the exact same underlying physics. Block the sun, move the air, add water, use the earth itself as insulation. By the end of the summer, Nacht isn't just copying tricks anymore, he's combining them. Put in charge of a small courtyard for a local official's house, he designs it with everything he's learned. Thick mud brick walls for thermal mass, small high windows to vent hot air, loose linen curtains instead of heavy doors, a shaded courtyard planted with trees, and at its entrance, a wet reed screen positioned to catch the prevailing breeze and cool it before it even reaches the main room. Historians have documented this exact pattern across the ancient Near East and North Africa, the shaded planted courtyard acting as a natural cooling core for an entire home, a design that would echo for thousands of years afterward in Islamic architecture and later in Spanish courtyard houses. Nacht never invented air conditioning, but what he built, without a single moving mechanical part, could realistically drop the indoor temperature several degrees below the street outside. In a 110-degree summer, that is genuinely the difference between misery and survival. And here's the part that turns this from just a cool historical fact into something bigger. Almost every one of these ancient tricks is still in use today. Evaporative coolers remain the primary cooling method across hot, dry regions of the world. Thick-walled, courtyard-style architecture is making a real comeback in sustainable building design, specifically because it slashes energy use compared to running a compressor around the clock. Even misting systems you see cooling outdoor restaurant patios today run on the exact same evaporative principle Nacht discovered with a wet reed mat. And when American engineer Willis Carrier built the first modern electrical air conditioner in 1902, he wasn't defying the physics ancient people had already mastered. He was mechanizing it. Same core principle: pull heat out of the air using evaporation and airflow. He just added a compressor and electricity to make it instant, on demand, at the flip of a switch. Nacht spent one brutal summer figuring this out through pure sweat and trial and error, with nothing but mud, reeds, and water. It took humanity another 3,000 years to plug the same idea into a wall. Think about that for a second. Every time you walk into an air-conditioned room and feel that first blast of cold air, you're feeling the end result of an idea that started with a man in a mud brick city 3,500 years ago, holding up a wet reed mat and noticing for the first time that the breeze on the other side felt different. He didn't have physics textbooks. He didn't have engineers or electricity or a single measuring instrument. He just had heat, water, and the willingness to keep trying things until something worked. So next time your air conditioner breaks in the middle of a heat wave, you now genuinely know how to survive it the old-fashioned way. Wet cloth, shaded courtyard, loose light clothing, drink your water, and whatever you do, don't work at noon.